As you may or may not know, my friends and I have begun to return to that old stalwart of late 90s children's pop culture, Pokemon, the trading card game. And so a decade or so late, I am now going to provide a lesson in the basic rules of the Pokemon trading card game. I'm not going to go into any of the minutiae of the game, I'm just going to explain the most basic rules in as short a time as I possibly can. Now, there are three basic categories of cards. There are Pokemon, energy cards, and trainer cards. Now, within the subcategory of Pokemon, there are two different kinds. Basic Pokemon and evolved Pokemon. Evolved Pokemon must be played on top of a basic Pokemon, which as you can see is specified in the upper left-hand corner of the evolved Pokemon card. Most Pokemon cards have one or more attacks on them. Charmander's first attack, Scratch, does 10 damage to your opponent's Pokemon. The second attack, Ember, does 30 damage to the opponent's Pokemon, and also contains additional instructions that must be followed. In the upper right-hand corner, you can see how much HP Charmander has. That's the number that tells you how much damage it takes to knock Charmander out. Now, you'll see that next to the text of each attack is one or more symbols. These symbols represent the energy cost associated with that attack. This is a fire energy card. It provides 1 fire energy. As you can tell from the top right corner, Charmander is a fire Pokemon, but his first attack, Scratch, does not require a fire energy. It requires a colorless energy, which means that energy of any color can be used to satisfy this cost. During each turn, you may attach 1 energy to 1 Pokemon. Once this energy is attached to Charmander, Charmander owns this energy, so the energy is not removed until a specific game effect tells you to take it away. So for instance, Charmander can now use Scratch and doesn't need to discard that energy. On my next turn, I can attach another energy to Charmander. This energy happens to be a Psychic type energy. Because Charmander now has 2 energy and at least one of them is fire, he can use the Ember attack. But Ember has additional instructions. It says you must discard 1 fire energy attached to Charmander in order to use this attack. So this is what Charmander will look like after I use Scratch. Dealing damage is the fundamental concept of the Pokemon game. So obviously that's the most important information on the card. But there's more information on the bottom row. As you can tell, Charmander has a weakness to water Pokemon, like Squirtle. What this means is that if Charmander's opponent brings out a Squirtle, then Charmander is in trouble because he takes double damage from Squirtles. In a case like this, it might be wise for Charmander to retreat. Charmander has a retreat cost of 1 energy. Unlike normal attack costs, retreat costs require you to discard the energy. And move to a part of the gameplay area called the bench, and I would replace Charmander with another Pokemon from the bench. More on the bench later. Now, Mischievous isn't weak against water, or in fact, anything at all. In fact, Mischievous has a resistance to fighting. So if Mischievous were attacked by, say, Diglett, Mischievous would have a distinct advantage. In addition to attacks, some Pokemon cards have Pokemon powers. These are used in different ways, but the instructions on the card will always give you all the information you need to know. And the final kind of card that I mentioned is the trainer card. It's really simple to explain. You can play a trainer card anytime during your turn and just follow the directions on the card. You need 60 cards in a Pokemon deck, and you can use no more than 4 of the same card, with the exception of basic energy cards. You can have as many of those as you want. So now you know what each card does. How does the game proceed? We each shuffle our deck and then draw 7 cards. Next, we check our hands to see if we have any basic Pokemon to start the game with. Looks like I've got 2. I choose one and place it face down in front of me. That's the active Pokemon, the one I'll be using to attack, and the one that my opponent will be attacking. The one I chose is Charmander. I have another basic Pokemon, so I can put it on my bench. The bench is behind the active Pokemon. Those Pokemon are on standby, just in case Charmander gets knocked out or I want to retreat it. Looks like my opponent's ready, and he's got 2 Pokemon on the bench. You're allowed to have up to 5. There's one thing left to do. Each of us puts out 6 prize cards for ourselves. Each time I knock out one of the opponent's Pokemon, I'll take one of my own prize cards. We flip a coin, and then it's decided that I go first. Now we flip over our Pokemon. My opponent's ready too. Looks like he's starting with Machop and has 2 Marils on the bench. Here's an explanation of what happens on each turn. First, the player whose turn it is draws a card. Then he can attach 1 energy to one of his Pokemon. It could be the active Pokemon or a Pokemon on the bench. I choose to put an energy on Charmander. The player can also play any trainer cards, but right now Charmander's perfectly healthy, so a potion really wouldn't do me much good. I could also evolve a Pokemon, but not on the turn that I first played it, so that includes the first turn for either player. My turn ends when I attack, and I use Charmander's Scratch. Machop takes 10 damage. 1 damage counter represents 10 damage. A lot of people use glass beads, but it's fine to use pennies or whatever else you want. Since an attack ends my turn, it's now my opponent's turn, and he draws a card. There are 3 ways I can win the game. The first is if I draw all of my prize cards. The second is if I knock out my opponent's Pokemon and my opponent has no more Pokemon left in play on the bench. And the third is if it's the beginning of my opponent's turn and he or she tries to draw a card, but can't because there are no more cards in the deck. Now, I should probably also explain special conditions like asleep, confused, paralyzed, and poisoned, but I probably don't have time, so consult a rulebook or someone who knows. But that aside, you basically now know how to play Pokemon cards. The rules of the game are pretty simple, but the higher level strategies can get pretty complex, and that's what makes the game fun, even for adult people. As a final note, just some business. Chris missed a video, so now he must be punished. As you may recall, the possible punishments are sonnet recitation, school uniform, and Star Wars holiday experiment. And if you don't recall them or don't recall what each of them entails, then I'll put information in the sidebar. So please post a comment voting for which one you want him to do. So that's about it, and I'll see you next video when I will probably be singing a song.